We're still in the studios, the World Economic Forum studios, and Channel TV is broadcasting live. I have the Managing Director of the World Economic Forum here with me, Mr. Philipp Rosler. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. This is your first time in Nigeria?
My first time in Nigeria, and it's great and beautiful.
Oh, seriously?
Yes.
So what have you seen so far in terms of moving Africa forward, in terms of investment? Like the theme of the World Economic Forum is improving things. The theme of this year,
Yes.
of this session, what? Inclusive growth,
Yes.
creating jobs.
So first and foremost, we can see around the world that Africa, the whole continent, is becoming more and more important in the global economic world. And what does it mean inclusively? It means growth of jobs for everyone. And so that means we need growth beyond normal trade, beyond exporting raw materials or commodities. So we need first and foremost investment, foreign direct investment. So that is one major issue, this World Economic Forum in Africa. We have all the financial institutes around the world, the heads of states and government, together this morning, for example, and they are talking about what can we do to invest money directly here in Africa, in infrastructure, in healthcare, for example, and very important, education.
But what about the issue, the challenges that many say are bound, challenges of policy, security, and how would that work out?
So infrastructure means not only highways or hospitals. Infrastructure means as well institution building. So that means you have strong and safe institutions so that you can have some reliability, the sound surrounding, and that means infrastructure as well, and that is one of our major issues. So if you can improve these questions, for example, institution building, then you can do much more for Africa and the people in Africa than now.
Okay. Now, when I asked about the challenges that many worry about, the issues of policy, when you talk about institutions building, strengthening the institutions, now there are those who believe that policies have made it, the instability in policies of government have made it such that you can't trust the institutions that have been. So how, are we going to be looking at changing policies and helping government strengthen their policies?
It's not our job to say something about policy and their direction. But what we can do is to talk about institutions, and that is our issue for this 2 days or 3 days. Because we are talking what can we do to have some administrations who are very confidential and all the people can trust them. So that is one issue. And we're talking with administrations in Africa, but outside as well.
What about global, let's look at the financial aspects of it,
Yes.
normalizing finances globally. How would that tie into this?
I think we now see that the financial market can calm down because we see end of the tunnel light regarding the Eurozone crisis. And that has directly consequences for Africa because now we have strong financial market. And so they have the power, they have the resources to invest, for example, on the Black African continent.
Now, do you think the continent is ready to receive this amount of investment? Yes, we know that the African economy is growing, it's one of the most robust economies and is growing massively. But is the continent ready to receive the amount of investment you're talking about?
Yeah, that is our job together to do something that you are ready to have all the investments from foreign countries. But for example, see some infrastructure projects. And I think Africa is becoming much more better than in the last years to realize streets, highways. Look at Nigeria, look at the street from the airport to the capital, to Abuja. So I think, yes, Africa is on a very good way.
Okay, just before you go, there's a question that someone asked earlier, that what are the implications of a Chinese slowdown? And China is massively investing around the world, and Africa has been one of the targets of the Chinese economy, so to speak. But what do you think would be the implications of a Chinese slowdown in terms of investment?
I think in 1 hour we will have the opening ceremony here at the World Economic Forum in Africa with Li Keqiang, the Chinese Prime Minister. I think that is not only a speech, that is a signal that China in the whole has a long-term interest in Africa. That's the reason why he is here. And so, yes, we see maybe a slowdown, but it's slower, but it's stronger as well, because the idea behind is to have much more than only trade relationship, much more than export raw materials or commodities. To have long-term investment partnership, I think that is the goal of the Chinese government, because as you mentioned, I think 18% of the African trade is with China, but only 4% of foreign direct investment comes from China. So there's enough room, enough space for much more investment, and that is maybe the goal, the idea for the next 2 or 3 days.
When the African continent, the population of the African continent, let's look at the demography here. The young population is believed to be between 60 and 70%, of the entire population. Now, as Africa attempts to rise or moves to rise, how would that population help to put it all together?
I think an African continent, and all experts say this, has the strongest and the biggest workforce in the world, because of the younger generation you mentioned. So our job is now to create inclusive growth, inclusive jobs for these younger people. That means first and foremost education. So that is the reason why we're talking about schools, universities, and online and so on. And the second is, the people do not expect the same development like in other countries or in other continents, but they expect, and that they're right, the same results, the same quality of education, of healthcare. So that is the reason why we are talking about leapfrogging. So how can we have a very fast, maybe disruptive innovation and disruptive steps for the people in Africa? So you must not have the same development like industry nations, but you must have the same results. So maybe you need much more innovations and technologies, for example, in the healthcare sector. And that is one topic for these 3 days as well, to leapfrog the healthcare in emerging economies.
Leapfrogging healthcare in emerging economies. What I asked earlier about the challenges that seem to be security challenges, is that taken into cognizance as well? Is that part of the investment in security? Is that part of what's going to be discussed during this forum?
It's part of the forum, but to say the truth, if you want to have in Africa investments, foreign direct investments, you need sound fiscal surrounding, and you need security as well for the companies. If they want to come, if they want to invest, they need security for their own staff. So that is a major challenge, major issue, but that depends on the institution building, and that is one of our major topics, as I mentioned.
Institutions, let's look at institutions and transforming infrastructural transformation and institution building. How would that tie in? At the end of the day, how effective would the discussions that take place here be? Yesterday we had private discussions in different areas. There are over 40 sessions that are going to hold here, and of those 40 sessions you have over 1,000 participants drawn from around the world. At the end of the day, what do you hope to achieve?
So our main objective for the World Economic Forum is first to create a community of interest on Africa. I think that is good. You mentioned the huge number of participants. The second is a community of purpose. Purpose means we have the commitment to improve the state of Africa. And third, and that is what you mentioned and what you asked for, we need a community of action, not only good ideas and good discussions. That's not the reason why we are here. We want to have actions, actions for the people in Africa. So after these 3 days, we need more projects for all these issues we mentioned: infrastructure, institution building, education, healthcare system. But the good news is we are in an ongoing process. Since the last World Economic Forum in Africa, it was in Cape Town, we have such projects like infrastructure or leapfrogging the healthcare. So then we have to go ahead with all our projects. So that means community of action, actions for the people in Africa.
I was going to say something.
Sounds good, huh?
It sounds real good. It sounds really impressive, and it sounds really attractive.
Yes.
But
Africa is attractive.
Africa is attractive.
Really?
What makes Africa so attractive to the world right now?
What all you mentioned? The dynamic societies.
Besides the population.
Fast-growing middle class. No, not besides population. The population, the people in Africa, that is our main focus.
The people in Africa.
And yes, and the areas is beautiful, but you find beautiful areas around the world as well. But the dynamic, the younger generation. So I think the energy you can see, that is, I think, a little bit unique. So I'm responsible in the World Economic Forum for all the regions in the world. So we have the same World Economic Forum in Latin America. We will have it in 2 weeks in Manila. But Africa is very specific. And yes, you can ask all my colleagues and myself. We are very proud that we are here. And it's a major issue to come to all these actions Africa needs.
Thank you very much, Philipp Rosler. We've been speaking with the Managing Director of the World Economic Forum, Philipp Rosler, and he's talked about the focus on Africa and why Africa is the target. Well, at this point in time, we'll take you to that session, which is happening right now, the Africa Rising session. We'll be back shortly.